Genesis chapter 22. I will probably be done a little bit early today. I'm going to start the next lesson after we get done with this, just to not the way that happens. We're going to finish up the third of the three tests that we've been looking at: food, Genesis chapter 21, 22, 23. We've seen several of these tests. We've seen Abraham passing the test and fails of the test. Most recently, passing most of these tests and passing with flying colors last week. The Isaac test is where we know very well about God telling Abraham to go up the mountain and sacrifice his son Isaac. We saw Abraham passing the test, flying colors, doing exactly as God told him to do, fully expecting God to either raise Isaac from the dead or do something at some point. He just blindly followed, right? He just, whatever God said to do, he went and did. And we saw the result and the reward of that as well. And then the lessons not only that taught Abraham, but you can imagine the impact that had on Isaac. And that would have been a pretty monumental, life-altering situation that he probably went back to and thought about for the rest of his life. I guarantee it. That would have been a big deal. He would have remembered that, and to see his father be so faithful to the Lord would have been very, very impactful. And I'm sure Abraham knew that, right? He understood he was being tested, but he also understood the lessons he was teaching his son. Abraham at this point very, very wise and been through a lot of stuff and failed some things and passed some things, but he was a big picture guy at this point. He kind of got it, and he would have understood the importance of that. So that's what we saw last week. Ishmael test was before that. Here's some of the lesson. This is a quick review from the Ishmael test. Remember, God told Abraham to let Ishmael and Hagar kind of put them out, send them on their way. It would have been difficult again for Abraham. It's his first son. But he was trusting in God to be faithful. God said he would take care of them, and he did. He let God work with his plan. He didn't try to intervene this time like he did last time. He allowed God to do what God wanted to do, planned on it. And of course, we know he resulted as well. Ishmael became a great nation, just like he had promised. Caused Abraham's people some problems, but nonetheless, God was faithful to his promise. We saw the Isaac test as well last week. And this is the test, the three things we learned from the Isaac test, and that was trusting God even when we don't understand all that he is doing. Okay, this would have been a great situation here that Abraham, I mentioned this last week. God comes to me and tells me, go take people somewhere and sacrifice, and I'm going to have a difficult time doing that. Even in the midst of, I don't understand what's going on, I think I would fight that. I shouldn't, but I probably would. Abraham, at this point, though, didn't understand what was going on, but he knew God had told him to do something, so he did. He was going to trust in him regardless of the circumstances. Didn't matter if things are going good, things are going bad. At this point, remember, this has been several years of tranquility and peace for Abraham. Things have been pretty good. And God shows up and tells him to go kill his son, sacrifice him. So Abraham didn't again, was going to trust him no matter what was going on, because he was willing to give everything that he had, everything that he was willing to give to God, because he understood that everything that Abraham had, his son, the wealth, the oxen, everything that he had was because God had given him that. It technically wasn't his. So he was willing to give anything back to the Lord, which I think is a pretty good lesson for us as well, just to remember that, God's blessed, with each and every one of us with certain things and nice things, or whatever the case may be, and taking care of us. And it's important to remember that we had nothing to do with that. It was just a blessing of God as being faithful to him and being faithful back to us. So those are the three lessons from the Isaac test. Today is the last test we're going to look at, and this is the land test. This runs from verse 15 of chapter 23, or chapter 22, down to verse 20 of chapter 23. And we see another God calling on Abraham again and testing him once again. So if you will, go to verse 15 of chapter 22. And this is going to see another reminding here of the Abrahamic covenant in the midst of all this, as the angel of the Lord calls on Abraham again. Let's start in verse 15, and let's read down to verse 18, and kind of see what the angel of the Lord And the angel of the Lord called unto Abraham out of heaven the second time, and said, By myself have I sworn, saith the Lord, for because thou hast done this thing, and hast not withheld thy son, thine only son. I can imagine Abraham's mindset here. He hears this voice again. He's probably thinking, oh, dang it, what now? Verse 16. And he said, By myself have I sworn, saith the Lord, for because thou hast done this thing, and hast not withheld thy son, thine only son, that in blessings I will bless thee, and in multiplying I will multiply thy seed as the stars of the heaven, and as the sand which is upon the seashore. And thy seed shall possess the gate of his enemies. And in thy seed shall all the nations of the earth be blessed, because thou hast obeyed my voice. So the angel of the Lord shows up to Abraham again, and essentially what he's doing here is just reiterating, right, the fact that because of Abraham's faithfulness, the angel of the Lord is reminding Abraham that he's going to be faithful to him as well. And we see within those 3 verses, once again, a confirmation of the Abrahamic covenant, which was, of course, back in chapter 12, was a threefold covenant that we've seen and mentioned a whole lot. And of course, the first one was land. He's going to show thee a great land. He's going to make a great nation out of him, and he's going to bless all the other families of the earth because through his seed and through his lineage that it was going to come from Abraham. And there was nothing here that could, nothing that will, and nothing that would be able to annul this covenant between God and Abraham. All right, so this is just, again, after this test has happened, Isaac and Abraham are back, and the voice of the Lord shows up and tells Abraham that because of his faithfulness, willing to do whatever it took, God was going to continue to remain faithful to the covenant that he had told him. Now, this has been 25 years, probably more like 30 years before any of this even happened. Probably even more than that. That he was a blessing. Christ was going to be the promised Savior of the world. Nothing could annul the covenant again, but faith was required for individual participation, within the Abrahamic covenant. Okay? Now, he added a couple things here. Added one thing to the promise. As you see in verse 18, he adds to the promise that descendants of Abraham would possess the gates of their enemies as well. If you look at the last part of verse 17. So he goes in multiplying, blessing the nations and the land and all that stuff. And possess the gates. And we see verse 17 with to this as well. What he was doing there was, again, continuing to encourage Abraham. He was still without any land at this point in Canaan. God's specific promise here about the enemy's gates would help bolster or increase Abraham's growing faith in this covenant as well. And think back over in chapter 20 and let's go to chapter 22 and verse 13. Abraham blamed God for making him wander around the land he didn't know. Chapter 20 and verse 13 it says this: It came to pass when God caused me to wander from my father's house, that I said unto her, This is thy kindness, which thou shalt show unto me at every place whither we shall come, save me, he is my brother. So he is back just a few chapters was blaming the Lord, making him wander around in a place that he didn't know, a house and land he didn't know. This is, again, God just reaffirming the promise, adding to the promise to help as just reassure and continuing Abraham's growing faith. Okay, Abraham here returns from offering Isaac to dwell at Beersheba, and that's where he heard and report of his brother's growing family. Okay, so we get to verse 19. So this is right after they're getting back from Beersheba. So Abraham returned to his young men, and they rose up and went together to Beersheba. And Abraham dwelt at Beersheba. And it came to pass after these things that it was told to Abraham, saying, Behold, Milcah, she hath also borne children unto thy brother Nahor. Huz is the firstborn, Buz his brother, and Kemuel the father of Abram. And Chest and Hazo, and Pildash, and Jiblath, and Bethuel. And Bethuel begat Rebekah. These 8 Milcah did bear to Nahor, Abraham's brother, and his concubine, whose name was Arumah. She bare also to Bob, and Gaham, and Tahash, and Maachah. Okay, so Abraham, as he gets back from Beersheba, he hears of this, his brother's growing family. But what we don't see is that we don't see Abraham traveling back to his homeland. He hears about this family growing. We don't see him traveling back because he was in the promised land. He was in the land God had promised him. That's where he was going to stay. All right. So again, we're seeing Abraham. He didn't own any of this stuff. Technically, God had told him his family was going to, that he would own this. We see him continuing to be faithful to the Lord in the midst of, him still having a few uncertainties and stuff kind of going on. All right, which brings us to chapter 23. And we continue to see Abraham having to deal with some stuff in his life. Okay? Verses 1 and 2 of chapter 23. And Sarah was 107 and 20 years old. These were the years of the life of Sarah. And Sarah died in Kirjatharba, the same as Hebron, in the land of Canaan. And Abraham came to mourn for Sarah and to weep for her. So Sarah now passes away at the age of 127. And we see Abraham in verses 1 and 2 mourning her death. Okay, here's Abraham who just lost a lifelong companion, somebody that they grew in faith together and learned to have faith in God together. And so the effect this would obviously would have had on Abraham, and with her passing, raises the question: where is Abraham going to have Sarah laid to rest at? Where is he going to bury her? Was he going to return back to Pada Aram, which was kind of the homeland, in case his descendants never actually inherited the promised land? Was he going to go back to where they originally came from and have her buried there, which would have been the custom at this time, during this time frame, and even on for several years, 100 years after this, the descendants would be buried back in their homeland. It's just kind of the ritual kind of thing that they did. And if Abraham was going to kind of follow through that, then he would have been showing that his homeland was not what God had promised, but the original homeland in which they came from. So we have another test here of Abraham's faith. All right, God has again just reiterated the fact that He's going to give him all these things. He's promised him this land, promised his descendants his land, and he's even as far as to say that they're going to sit in the gates of the enemies who were dwelling in the land at this time. Sarah then passes away, and this is Abraham's actual homeland, and he was going to have her buried there. Okay, so we see the next test of Abraham's faith here. Read verses 3 and 4. And Abraham stood up from before his dead and spake unto his sons of Heth, saying, I am a stranger and a sojourner with you. Give me a possession of a burying place with you, that I may bury my dead out of my sight. Now, why would burying Sarah in the promised land, why would that be an act of faith for Abraham? Exactly. So because he didn't own any land, right? And he had to ask somebody else to give him that land. He at the time owned nothing of the promised land. And God's promise again that his descendants one day would own the land would be the only reason that Abraham would have for burying Sarah in Canaan. Okay? So having Sarah buried in Canaan would be exercising faith in God's promise that it would be fulfilled, even though that it may be hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years into the future before the promise is even actually entirely fulfilled. And as we see in verses 3 and 4, again, he talks before he stood before his dead, spoke to the sons of Heth, saying, I'm a stranger and sojourner with you. Give me a possession of burying place with you, that I may bury my dead out of my sight. Verse 5. And the children of Heth answered Abraham, saying, Hear us, my Lord, thou art a mighty prince among us. In the choice of our sepulchres, bury thy dead. None of us shall withhold from thee his sepulchre, but that thou mayest bury thy dead. And Abraham stood up and bowed himself to the people of the land, even to the children of Heth. And he communed with them, saying, If it be your mind that I should bury my dead out of my sight, hear me, and entreat for me to Ephron the son of Zohar, that he may give me the cave of Machpelah, which he hath, which is in the end of his field. For as much money as it is worth, he shall give to me for possession of a burying place among you. So Abraham here speaks to the Hittites. That's who the sons of Heth would have been. These would have been the Hittites. He wanted the Hittites to intercede on his behalf with Ephron, who was the owner of the land they were at, that he would be able to purchase a portion here up on the ground which he wanted to have to be able to bury Sarah in. And he wanted to purchase the cave of, we saw there in verse 8, I think it was, or verse 7, the cave of Machpelah. As we continue to read down through verse 9, we see that Ephron offers up just to give him the land, was this empty gesture of custom. In fact, what Ephron was doing here was he was actually driving a pretty hard bargain. Him offering to say you can just have it was kind of just an empty customary type thing. Because what he said, as we saw in verse 9, the cave in Machpelah, which he had, which is the end of his field, for as much money as it is worth shall it give me for possession, a burying place amongst you. Ephron here again driving a pretty tough bargain and telling him that the land is actually worth quite a bit of money. As a matter of fact, he goes on and tells him 400 shekels of silver, which was, of course, what he was expecting Abraham to pay. Verse 8, and Ephron dwelt among the children of Heth, and Ephron the Hittite answered Abraham in the audience of the children of Heth, even all that went in at the gate of the city, saying, Nay, my Lord, hear me, the field to give I thee, in the cave that is therein, I give it to thee, in the presence of the sons of my people I will bury thy dead. And Abraham bowed down himself before the people of the land, and spake unto Ephron in the audience of the people of the land, saying, But if thou wilt give it, I pray thee, hear me, I will give thee money from the field, take it of me, and I will bury my dead there. And Ephron answered Abraham, saying unto him, My Lord, hearken unto me, the land is worth 400 shekels of silver. What is that betwixt me and thee? Bury therefore thy dead. And Abraham hearkened unto Ephron. And Abraham weighed to Ephron the silver, which he had named in the audience of the sons of Heth, 400 shekels of silver, current money, with the merchant. So Abraham again cost the field here. Ephron is driving a pretty difficult bargain, telling him that the land is worth 400 shekels of silver, which is what he was expecting Abraham to pay. The average cost, though, of a field was actually only 4 shekels. And a fertile garden, a very fertile field, the cost would have only been worth about 40 shekels of silver. And here Ephron is trying to make Abraham pay 400 shekels of silver. But as we see in verses 17 and 18, in the field of Ephron, which was in Machpelah, which was before Mamre, the field and cave which was therein, and all the trees that were in the field, and there all the borders round about it were made sure unto Abraham for a possession in the presence of the children of Heth, before all that went in at the gate of his city. So we see that Abraham becomes the official, actual owner of this field and the cave as well. Now that was all the land Abraham ever owned, the land of Canaan, because he knew and probably expected to never really fully possess it in his lifetime. He knew that the promise of the land of Canaan would be fulfilled and it probably wasn't around. His descendants in the future would be the ones that would possess it. He needed no guarantee that he was going to have all of Canaan because he knew that God promised him that his descendants, at least at some point, would possess the land. When Abraham dies, over in chapter 25, and we'll get to that, Isaac and Ishmael, as we'll see, actually let's flip over there, we got time. Let's go to chapter 25 and go to verse 8. So Abraham, we just think this happened. He bought the land in Canaan for 400 shekels. He bought the cave as well. He buried Sarah in the land of Canaan. Okay, that's what just happened, right? We all agree agreements with that. We see what just took place. Verse 8 of chapter 25 in this happens. That Abraham gave up the ghost and died in a good old age, an old man full of years, and was gathered to his people. His sons, Isaac and Ishmael, buried him where? Exact same cave where Sarah was at. Right? We see him being buried in the same cave. The cave of Mount, the field of Ephron, son of Zohar the Hittite, which is before Mamre, the field which Abraham purchased of the sons of Heth. There was Abraham buried, and Sarah his wife. So we see both of them being buried in their land that they possessed. Chapter 4, see kind of interesting, kind of full circle here as Isaac and Ishmael come together to bury him there. Okay. All right, some of the lessons here from the land test that Abraham just finished up with. And the test concerning the land and being able to be kind of reflective and looking at the test of faith here. As we see lessons from the land test, acting by faith, resting in the Lord, being patient, and waiting on the Lord as well. So now that we've seen these three tests and seen the lessons, the 9 lessons from these 3 tests, we can kind of look the aspects of Abraham's faith and see if it is reflective of our faith when we are dealt with tests as well. Abraham passes all 3 of his tests of faith. A testimony to what God can do in someone rather than how great Abraham was. And this fact, and seeing these tests, the passing of these tests, and what he did during these tests, gives all of us hope that we can also be men and women of faith of God, of men and women of faith that God wants us to be. Now, last couple questions and I'm done. When we don't put our faith in God, what are we essentially concluding about Him? When we don't put our faith in God, what are we essentially concluding about Him? He's not able and He's not faithful. Right? He's not able and He's not faithful. He's not faithful and therefore not worthy of our faith. God is not trustworthy. That's essentially what we were saying. As we go through life and face a variety of circumstances and decisions, God wants to see our faith. He doesn't want to hear our solutions. He doesn't want to hear our excuses or our complaints. He rewards faith because by it we acknowledge that He is faithful to both His promises and to His character. Sometimes God uses situations such as financial difficulties, an illness, a strained relationship, a death, or other important decisions to test our faith. So how might, now, I'll answer this out loud, but how might God be testing your faith, and what will you gain from the test? You either resent or try to escape. Let's pray. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for another lesson we have here, Lord. Thank you for being able to take Abraham's life and see some of the situations that he dealt with. Excuse me, and how he was so faithful, Lord, at times, and not so faithful at times as well, Lord, but how you were constantly blessing him, reminding him, and making sure that testing him and purify his faith, Lord. He saw the greater importance of leaning in the line completely and totally on you, Lord. I pray that's the same thing that we do as well in our lives, that we continue to lean in the line on you in more ways, Lord, so that we can continue to be more in faith with you. The Lord is great, Lord, and my faith is strong. I pray for Pastor Ross as he comes in the next hour as well, Lord, you just continue to use him in my way, keep us sustained and focused on the words you have for us this morning. Amen. Next week we'll jump into lesson number 10 and look at Jacob and Isaac and